I am Alana from Chicken House Press, and this is Writer's Chat. Look how festive you are. I love it. Your bookshelf looks great.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm like usually I kind of have it more centered, but the light is so much better. So it's like, oh, we'll go angle because this is where the light is.
Yeah, it looks great. So, the United People,
Yeah.
it launched on Sunday.
Yep.
So, today is Wednesday.
Yes.
so, so for 3 days, it's kind of been out in the world. How was your launch you did it at a local bookstore?
Turns and Tails is amazing for being so supportive to local authors. Like I can't get over how encouraging they are. And I went in this time feeling a little nervous because you're like, well, it's a second book, and like everybody came to the first one because they want to support you, and will as many people show up for number two? And so I kind of said that as I was like getting my table ready, and they were all like, oh, we're excited. Like they were very like uplifting to authors, and yeah, everyone I've talked to has like the same things to say about them. So if you're local to Chatham, go to Turns and Tails. Like, they support authors and stories of all kinds, so it's great. It's a good establishment to have in town.
That's really encouraging because it feels like a lot of independent bookstores that don't support authors in the same way, which is really sad and seems really backwards. But that's really encouraging that
Yes.
you found one, that you have one right close to you.
Yeah, it is very encouraging. And yeah, I know what you mean, that sometimes they I don't know, it almost feels like you have to prove yourself a bit, and you're like, when you're just starting, you're like, oh, I haven't.
Yeah,
So
I
it's nice
got
to have.
yeah, you're my
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really encouraging.
Okay, so the books are on the shelf there.
Yeah, yeah, they're on the shelf, and which is it's fun to see. They usually Two Turns and Tails is great for like putting it out near the front for any new releases. So like I get to go with those. But then it's also, I have to admit that like as time went on with the World Collective there, it was just nice to walk in and see it like on the YA shelf though too, like just up there with all the other YA. So
Yeah.
I'm like, because that's where it's supposed to live. So yeah, you can find it there, both books, and we've been offering a little sale too at
Mhm.
Turns and Tails right now for book one to kind of encourage that Christmas shopping, pick up both sort of thing.
Well, it's a great Christmas gift.
Mm-hmm.
If you like get
I'm
the
all
two
for
books, get people really hooked so that book three,
it.
when it comes, they'll be eager, chomping at the bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a good turnout. But there was one reader who I know, and she was like right there, right at start time because she's been waiting all year for book two. So
Yeah.
that was just really encouraging that she's picking up the copy to take home and read it right away. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's good.
And that seemed to be the response after the World Collective came out. The majority of response was, I can't wait for book
Yeah.
two. Like, why are you making us wait so long? Did you feel that pressure?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, it kind of makes it there's expectations now to live up to, sort of thing. So yeah, no, I definitely felt the pressure
Yeah.
when you know polishing and finalizing book two was just trying to get it right and to find that balance to answer enough of that. Um, but I almost want to say angst that like book one kind of ends and like you want to know what's more. So like to answer enough of that, but also be like it's not done. Like there's still a whole nother book coming. Sort of like find
Yeah.
that balance of giving enough answers to the questions you have as a reader, but then also enough like hints that there's more to come, sort of thing. So yeah, it was intimidating to figure out.
For sure. And when you don't have the whole series written, to be confident enough
Yeah.
that you're putting out book two now, do you know the whole
When
span of book three?
when I was finishing book two, no. So I like had ideas like all along. I've had ideas of like a general. This is where it's going to end up, and I knew certain things that were definitely going to happen, and certain things that I would not have happen. Like some things were finalized in my head, but there was a lot that wasn't. And I think that's because character wise, like different characters showed up in the story that I hadn't necessarily anticipated, or they became more important than I thought they would be, sort of thing. And so thinking about the ending, I'm like, an ending needs to be satisfying. You need to wrap up what's happening with multiple storylines. At least I feel like for World Collective, I was like, it's Rye's story. But
Mhm.
I also feel like you meet these other characters and you're into the world, so you need to have enough an answer for like to satisfy all those endings.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when I was in the middle of book two, I did not know all those endings yet. And that was very intimidating. At this point, now, like with it released, book three, it's much more finalized. Like, I wouldn't say it's finished, and I'm not like super, like, there's still things I'm tweaking, but it's much more in my head than it had been. And so then yeah, it does make it like this breath of relief. Like, okay, I know where it's
Right.
going. Like, I know what's happening to different people. I know what the world's gonna look like. Like, okay, like, yeah,
Keeping all those characters straight. So there are a lot of characters that have really pivotal roles, like they're very important. And you did a really good job in book two in further developing those characters, because some of them we just got a little taste of them in
mm,
book one. And then book two, we kind of really dove into some. And then, like you said, met new ones. So do you have like a series Bible that you're where you're keeping track of all these characters, all their important little points and
yeah. I wish it was more like official. Like, I know some people are much better organized than I am. I have a notebook and things get written down in the notebook, but it's not very organized. So there's a lot of page flipping. But
Yep.
yeah, no, they're definitely there. And I think too, like as I got more focused, it was that recognizing that each of these characters do have different motivations and different wants. And a few of them, like whenever I was finding I was having a problem because I hadn't fleshed out enough what that individual really wanted. And
Mhm.
like as soon as that would come into play, then it made like revision so much easier, because then you could tailor, even if they were over here on the side, it still shaped like how they were responding and how they interacted with Rye. And two, sometimes it was like so much more conflict then, because what they want and what Rye wants might be very different. Or the ones I found more interesting were with the characters who want the same things but had very different ideas of how to get it. And so
Mhm.
those were the ones that were like, yeah,
Yeah.
they start to play into that.
There's a lot of different tensions,
Yeah.
which keeps the story really interesting. I really loved the way, and no spoilers here, but I love the way that Rye's father plays in book two. I think that the tension, the dynamic there is fascinating. And I'm excited to see that play out. I'm also really worried
Yeah.
about what's going to happen to Daddy. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like her relationship with her dad and how that changes in book two is really a big part of the story, because she had this idea of her family in her head. And that already made her kind of different from everybody else in her world, where family wasn't as important. So to really dig into that relationship a bit more. And yeah, it was, I don't know, it was definitely something that was very key to me. And I think because I was seeing it from the two sides, I can see the story from Rye, the 14-year-old,
Mhm.
and the way you view your parents is perfect. And like, you kind of look up to them and they're the ones who can fix any problem, like that idea you have as a child, but then how it changes as you start to realize that they're just as human as you are and they make mistakes. But then on the other hand, as a parent, I can really see the world from her dad's point of view, and just like how you really want to make a world for your child where they're safe and where they're happy, and sort of like I can understand his motivations for what he did too. So yeah, it was something. I feel like book two was really about exploring those relationships and how things are never really as simple as they seem. They're always a bit more complex because everybody has different ways of seeing the world and different motivations. And yeah,
Mhm.
so it was trying to peek at that in a fast paced, like lots of other things going on at the same time, to have that story though in there as well.
Now, as far as all the technical, um, smart stuff, like listen to me, yeah, the smart stuff in your book. Um, so there was time spent in book one really developing the world, presenting this kind of new world where we have different technology. So did you feel more freedom in book two? Because the world's already established. You don't have to, there's not as much invention as far as a future. Did that change your approach? Did it make it easier? How did that play for you?
I think in parts it was easier. I'm assuming that people have read book one and will have a general idea of, when I reference the pods or something like that, that they've kind of already idea that this is, this is how they get around, and or the palm scanners that that they're familiar with some of those things. I wouldn't say it made it easier though, because at the same time, I feel like maybe in book two, as Rye is getting more into her world and with data, the technical side of how some of these things work and how the code works needs to be a bit more present. And I too am not a technical person. So there was always kind of this fear that could I keep it believable and keep it accurate enough, even though it's a creative world. I'm like, there's still rules to how things work, especially in programming or in coding. And I know that I'm no expert. So I'm like, if somebody who is an expert at coding picks it up, are they going to, find errors? And they might. I'm like, I feel like my one saving grace though is that the story is from Rye's perspective, and Rye knows how clueless she is, and she knows that she makes mistakes too. So I feel like that helps me a little bit as a writer, that her mistakes are my mistakes, and kind of vice versa.
Like, what is a firewall?
Yeah, yeah,
I guess
like
just the simple stuff that's still language that we understand today, even though we may be like Rye and not really know. We
yeah,
need our friends to explain
yeah,
it. Yeah, I felt like that was handled really with a simplicity that made it really easy to just get into the
okay,
story. It wasn't like a heavy, and neither was book one, right? Even as
mm-hmm.
you established all this stuff, it's really palatable and
Oh, that's
simple.
good to hear.
Yeah, yeah. I think your world building is so incredible.
Thanks.
And I don't know how you did it. So
It's up
congratulations.
there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we move into book three, we're stepping outside the world collective, which I'm very excited about seeing how you imagine the world beyond that
Yeah,
um, that group. So that's going to be really, I'm very excited.
yeah. I like book three. I feel like every book holds a special place in your heart, but
Of course.
endings are kind of exciting too. So yeah. And like it's a long time coming though. Everyone still has to wait to hear the end, but it's coming.
Yeah, and that's okay, right? Like anticipation is
Yeah.
good, and you've been doing such a good job of keeping interest up and keeping things in front of people, and I've been really impressed with your social media presence and how you keep telling people there's a book and it's a great story and here's a little sneak peek at what it's about, and you've done a really great job of that.
Thanks. It's interesting. So, book launch was just last Sunday, and I feel like total transparency, the last couple of days have been kind of a low, which I like. You kind of expect it to be a high, but instead it was a low. And I think it's that I'm trying to think of how to quantify it. Just knowing that in the world of books and authors, I'm still quite small, sort of
Mhm.
thing. And you know, it's tiring to keep putting yourself out there and feel like it's just like this big echo. And I think maybe part of what has made me notice it is, of course, like people are coming to the book launch, or I was at another event last night with friends, and so they're asking, and they just all assume that like you're selling tons of books and like you must have a huge following, and you're kind of like, no, not really. Like,
Screaming into the
and then
void.
it's like, I know. And it's great that they think like highly, and positively, and I appreciate that they see me that way. But I don't know. It's honestly like our world that we live in right now, it can be hard not to compare yourself to others. Like yeah. And so I think I've been battling that, and just knowing though, I keep coming back to I've always believed in her story, in Rye's story and the World Collective, and whether 10 people read it, 100 people read it, like, and just be like, I'm still proud of what I've done, and it's out there, and people might not find it today, but maybe they'll find it, next month or in a year, and it will still like it exists now. Like it's out there, it's on a shelf, it can be in a library,
Yeah.
And so that's when I get down, I keep reminding myself that being an author is definitely not instant gratification. Like there's no, it's
Uh,
very
It's
slow
a
and drawn out.
long,
Yeah.
painful journey in many ways. Yeah. Did you find the same kind of roller coaster of emotions after book one, after The World Collective?
No, I think it's worse this time. And I think it's because with book one, it's just like still that high of like, I
Yeah.
did it. Like, I just, you couldn't stop picking up the copy and be like, it's real. Like, because like, for so long, this is what you want. And it seemed so far away and impossible. And so I think that high lasted a lot longer of like, I have a physical book and I can hand it to people and I can drop it off at the library for, to be on their shelf. And so I don't know. I feel like book two, it just didn't last as long that high, which is sad, but it's, I don't know. I feel like I want to be honest and admit that that was the case. And it doesn't mean I'm any less proud of book two though. If anything, I'm more proud that I continued it and like, yeah, that book three is coming and that this whole story is going to exist. Like
Mm.
a lot of people talk about doing it and never finish. And so I'm like, I'm going to finish. Like it's going to
Yeah.
happen and it's going to exist.
You've got the
Um,
follow through. You're in that like little 1%.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think it's also just going, yeah, I'm not going to be the next Suzanne Collins or, like I don't need to expect that.
Right. Yeah.
We
It's
all kind of want,
it's realistic expectations. And if your measurable is really how you feel about the story that you've created,
mm,
then you already won.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think anyone who is thinking about writing and publishing a book, I think, yeah, you have to really evaluate what is success. Because
Yes.
if your success is selling, hundreds of copies or thousands of copies or whatever, you might be disappointed. Like, like realistically, it might happen and that'd be amazing. But I think you also have to be prepared for it might not. And yeah, so how are you going
It's
to
a
measure
jungle out
success?
there. And
Yeah.
and so the market is so saturated. And I know I've seen on my end book sales have like just plummeted in like the
Mm,
last quarter of this year. And I feel like the world's just in a place. Life is so expensive and
yes.
it's a tough time to try and sell anything. But the beautiful thing about books are that they're evergreen. Like
Yes.
how many times did I go back and reread The Hobbit or Harry Potter or things like that, right? That they keep finding their audience in
Yes.
every generation. So just because something doesn't do well in its first week of launch doesn't mean it's going to
Yes.
find its audience in cycles down the road, or that suddenly in March we're going to see a resurgence of book sales, or who knows what's going to
Yeah.
happen. If your measurable is how rich you're going to get as an author or as a publisher,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's not happening. But it's about the love of the story and the love of books, and just putting yourself on a shelf beside your favorite. That's really
Yes.
powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, like I had an event in November at
Mhm.
our local library, and a teen came by and was interested in the book, but of course he didn't have any like cash. He couldn't pick up a copy, and to just be able to like be like, well, it's here in the library, and like, and yeah, he went over and got it off the shelf. It was like showing me like I'm signing out your book, and I felt like, sure, I didn't make a sale, but I might have got a new reader, and to me
That's
that
huge.
matters more, right? Like
Yes.
I was super excited for the team to be like, yeah, take it home. Like that's just as good, sort of thing. So yeah, I think your story can take time, but there are so many readers out there that will find it eventually. And I think too, like when you talk about the market being saturated, it isn't, and it isn't at the same time. I think readers, people who love stories, and you tend to want more. So like I think when you go even meeting like other authors and things, it doesn't feel like a competition. It feels like we're creating together. And if anything, if you write something similar to someone else, it's an opportunity to be like, well, your readers might be my readers. Like they might like the same thing because somebody who loves YA dystopians tend to want to read all of them, right? Like it's not like they're only going to read one and they're done. It's like, no, they want to read like all of them and compare them. And same with fantasy. Like fantasy readers read so much. Like they just, yeah. So I think, again, it's like that measuring your success isn't sales, it's finding your story making connection with other people, I think. And yeah, that can come through one or two, or yeah, and it's
Mhm.
just as important then. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about killing off characters.
Okay.
So, so you know that I had a really kind of visceral emotional reaction the first time I read your manuscript. I was quite upset with you.
I'm sorry.
No, no, it was like in the best way. So there's a character who dies in United People that it surprised me. I did not see it coming, and I cried like real tears. I had a real reaction. I want to know what happened on your end as you wrote that. What led to that decision? Don't give anything away as far as who it is, because I want I want your book to destroy other people. Like I think like, if we're talking about measurables, I think any kind of emotional reaction is such a huge marker of a successful book. If you can get
Mm-hmm.
if you can elicit some kind of really raw reaction, even if it's rage, or like laugh out loud or
Yeah.
crying, whatever. I
Yeah.
think that's a real measure of a great book. So talk about
Yeah.
your decision around that and how you navigated that emotionally. Maybe maybe you're made of stone and it didn't affect you at all, but
No, yeah, it's gut wrenching. Like for anybody, it's gut wrenching to do to kill a character off. The one we're talking about, I knew when they were introduced in book one
book
what was
one.
going to happen. Yeah, I knew, and which just made it worse. Like in some ways, when I read book one and knowing, like it just, my heart breaks even then. I'm like, I know what's coming, but for me, it was really important to show in book two how the World Collective was just falling apart and how these changes that were made in the code might have, been in one area specifically, but because of that, it's having this like ripple effect through everything, sort of thing, in the world. And like most of book two, and even in book one, there's lots of these little clues that things are off.
Mhm.
And Rye, especially in book one, Rye is not really aware of most of them. Like we know the key ones she's aware of, but there's a lot of other little things I was sticking in there
Mhm.
that are just these hints that things aren't as perfect as they're supposed to be. And so with this character, yeah, I just knew that it's just another one of those symptoms of the problems are growing and what was tiny is now becoming huge, sort of thing. And the fact that, yeah, it's hard not to give away, but the
Yeah.
circumstances of it, the circumstances and the guilt then that follows for Ryan, the other character involved, just that there's these things that happen that are beyond your control, but sometimes you can't. You still also go, what could we have done differently to have stopped this? I really wanted to explore that, and for 14-year-olds to be dealing with some of those things, like there's just, in the first place, they shouldn't be. Like it's kind of that. I hope that comes clear, but that it shouldn't have been their responsibility. It shouldn't have been on them in the first place, and that's a mistake right there in itself. And then yeah, that all these things are compounding, and teens can't deal with everything. They're not going to. Like we just, they might feel like adults at times, but at the same time, emotionally and mentally, they're still growing and they'll make mistakes. And some of those mistakes have serious consequences. And yeah, that's gut wrenching. Like it can be totally gut wrenching. So yeah, I hated writing it on the one hand. Because you're like, I can see all the ways we can prevent this, and especially like as an author, you're like, well, I could just write this differently, and we could prevent this, and have a happy, this could be a high in the story where we stop this, and um, but at the same time, Rye's world was falling apart, and
Yeah.
this is
The integrity of the story kind of depends on that kind of tragedy
yeah,
to
yeah.
propel it forward. Yeah.
And I think though too, it was also Rye is growing though, and I feel like in book two, she's learning how to process some of these like super overwhelming feelings of guilt and failure and things like that, and she's learning how to use the music to help her not let the bad things happen define who she is. And so, yeah, having this tragedy, which it's like it's tragedy, happen and seeing how she has to struggle with it and also how the other friend involved struggles with it, which you get a bit more in book three as well. We kind of explore moving through healing in that too. But yeah, it was kind of hard to do, but necessary sort of
Did
thing.
you
And
did
I'm
you
like,
write in chronological order, or did you kind of resist that and skip over it? Because I know when I wrote my last book, there was a scene that I was really afraid to write, and I don't even
mm,
know why. Like I had a real block against it, and I wrote everything around it, and then I like took a year off because I
yeah,
because I couldn't I
you couldn't do
couldn't
it.
couldn't get over it. Like I just couldn't make myself do it. So
Yeah.
did you were you that lame in in the execution or or did you find you knew what
No,
had to
this I think because I knew from the start, I was
happen?
okay with it. I had more trouble in book one with Jeff. That one was harder for me. I had that I kept like wavering and trying to find like a different way. Like I just didn't want to do that. And sometimes I feel like I have so much writing about Rye and Jep that happened before and it just wasn't in the right place in the story and I've cut a lot of it. And so sometimes I can look back at book one and I go, I don't know if the reader sees as much of Jep as I know him, sort of thing. And so yeah, I still really dislike what happened to him. Like I would still switch it if I could, sort of thing, and give him a happy ending because I think my feelings for yeah him as a character are yeah very strong. And not to say they didn't care about
Yeah,
book
yeah.
two,
Yep. Of course. But
but I think she knew
we do
better.
get attached to certain
Yeah,
characters, right?
yeah,
In our own writing that doesn't necessarily translate
yeah,
into the finished project. So that's really interesting.
yeah. And unfortunately, no spoilers, but book three is also things are going wrong. Like I just like
Oh, I'm so scared.
I know. Yeah. I'm like, we are writing a story about a code that kills people, so it's
It's
deadly.
part of it. Yeah, we know it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
That's heavy. But I see it as a with a redemptive arc.
Hmm.
Like I'm very hopeful for the final chapter. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not like 100%
Mhm.
done. Like I'm still tweaking, but the over idea, yeah, I'm really happy with how it ends and where the characters are at the ending and stuff like that. Yeah, and and I do want it to be uplifting and to leave with like this lingering of hope that yeah
Mhm.
that things can get really bad, but it's not the
Yeah, don't give up.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You are a local something for NaNoWriMo. What's your
yeah,
title?
municipal liaison. Like that's a
Okay.
mouthful.
So November was National Novel Writing Month, and you participated. How did that go for you?
I did not win this year. So NaNoWriMo in my journey as a writer has definitely played a key part. I do really well with the deadlines and just that kind of like peer motivation of knowing that people are looking. Like
Yeah.
and especially being like our this community like Chatham Kent's ML, and I'm busy encouraging everybody else to keep writing. It just like doubly point, like all the fingers are pointing back at myself too to like keep going. Like I'm telling other people to keep going, even when you're like really behind on your word count. Then it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I can do the same. So yeah, it's interesting too to do it at this stage, like with the World Collective. It's definitely my focus in that
Mhm.
story because I have a contract because
Yeah.
like we have a schedule that we want to publish things on. So and promoting for United People. It was kind of that November was busy and that, I wanted to keep that forefront because to me that's like the goal right now.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it was a lot of fun to do a nano project this November because because book 3 is in the revising stages and tweaking, it was like, what am I going to write for November? It was like something totally new. And it was just fun to be like, I'm going to do like a totally new story for the month. I actually had kind of a rough outline, which I don't always do. Sometimes I just wing it. And I had a rough outline, and I had two characters that I was really excited to dig into. So I didn't write 50,000 words, but I have like this start, like these, I feel like
Mhm.
they're the building blocks at the bottom here of a new story.
Yeah.
And that felt good to go somewhere. I kind of decided that after the World Collective's done, I'm not doing another trilogy for a little while. That
Yeah.
takes a lot of brain power. I'm like, the next book is standalone by itself, just one.
To what
Yeah.
kind of audience?
So still YA. This one, and still similar themes. It has similar themes as the World Collective. Again, it's kind of the speculative, more current to our world right now, but it's basically the world is ending sort of thing. And it's this idea that if all the adults were gone, sort of thing, in the
Oh,
world.
Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, yeah. So that's like the very basic premise of it. It's a lot more to it, but kind of exploring that story and these two characters. A bit of romance, though, in this one. I would say it's a little, the characters are older than the Collective's characters, so a bit of a different feel to it, but it's still kind of exploring those, like, when everything's going wrong, what do you
Mhm.
stand on, sort of thing, and how do you continue on when your world is falling apart around you. I think those are the themes that I keep coming back to. So,
Well, because they're so rich.
yeah, yeah,
Like, you put characters under pressure, they're either going to do really great things or really terrible things. And seeing those things come to light is really,
yeah,
that's exciting. That's exciting for a writer, and that's exciting for the reader on the other end.
yeah.
So lean in if that's where your
It
your
seems to
creativity
be
is
my
taking
spot.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing terrible things to these poor characters and then telling them, have hope.
Yeah.
Everything's
Yeah.
wrong, but have hope.
Put it together, guys. Let's go.
Yeah.
Have your daughters read United People yet?
No,
Okay.
which is really funny because Abigail my oldest read the World Collective like when it was in its early stages,
Yeah.
and that was a huge mistake. And so we learned
Oh,
from that mistake.
so why?
So preteens are brutally honest. So any, especially if it was an early version too, like any faults, any problems, like she was very much like, look at this, like this is so
Yeah.
painful. At the same time, helpful, great feedback. This time though too, I think she wanted to read the finished version and to just see it as the finished version as opposed to the processes of going through it. They definitely know the story because I'm a talker when I have a problem. So I'm gonna be like talking it out loud, and usually they're the sounding walls of like, I need to figure this out. So they know the gist of the story. But yeah, she was kind of waiting until we had the copy sort of thing so that then she can take it off to school and read it at school. And if anyone asks her, she can be like, my mom wrote it. So
Oh, I love that.
it'll probably happen in the next week. So yeah,
Yeah,
and then I'll get to hear her opinion.
that's great. Have you made any connections with the schools? Like sometimes classes would be open maybe to invite you in to share.
We live really close to our school as well, so we've had very great relationship with the teachers there. And so last year with the World Collective coming out, most of the staff was just like, we know an author. Like they were so excited to be able to be like, we know an author. So I did. I got to have the opportunity to go in and speak to the grade 7 and 8s, kind of in class settings, and just share that journey of becoming an author, which was a lot of fun to share with them because myself as a grade 7 and 8 would never have thought it was possible just because of my struggles with spelling and with grammar. Like I love stories, but I didn't think it was achievable for me. So it was a lot of fun to go in there and be like, it is achievable. Like it's work and it's going to be a lot hard, but if it's something that you have a dream and you're passionate about, like it's possible. So yeah, they were super supportive, and the book is in a number of school class libraries there. Two of the teachers read it aloud, which my kids were
Oh,
in those classes, but they were doing it as a read aloud, and so they knew the story, and like everyone would be, the teachers are getting some engagement. So like, what do you think's going to happen? Or like getting their feedback. And so then they'd come home and they'd tell me like everything that was happening, which was, yeah, that was exciting and fascinating and a little scary too, to be like, oh, I know them. Like they walk by my house. Like they don't like it. Am I? But no, it was very positive. So now I'm kind of like, oh, I need to get into the high school. So that's my next goal, is to
Mm.
have an
Mhm.
opportunity to. There's a really great librarian at our local high school, so I think I need to meet with her and see if there's some opportunities to
Yeah,
share there too.
yeah, that'd be great.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
So you were talking about predictions, people like students throwing out predictions.
Mhm.
Did you have other people who were guessing like what's coming after they read The World Collective?
It was interesting that a few people, and it was more adults who read this story, I think kind of had this idea of like, and I'm sure a lot of it is what's happened in the last couple of years with the pandemic and governments, I think. And there are different ideas out there about being controlled, and so there were a couple people who felt like I I was speaking to that I was like kind of supporting the idea that our government's trying to control us, like in what was happening currently. And I was just like floored because like that was nowhere on my radar at all, like those thoughts. And I think in part because I started writing the story way before COVID happened, way before any of those, mandates and things like that. Like, so it was not on my radar. I wasn't intentionally speaking about our current government or things like that. I was imagining this future world. So those kind of caught me off guard, and I never knew how to respond when they were like saying. I was just like, okay, like, glad you enjoyed the story. Like, I don't know. So that was interesting. I feel like that hasn't happened with the younger readers. That was more adults who are picking up the story,
Yeah.
and I guess I think knowing that it's that scary side of a writer that you have your story in your head and your heart, but once you put it out in the world, it's not entirely yours anymore, and the reader will always bring their own things to it too. So yeah, just kind of having to let that go and go, okay, like that might not have been my intention, but they that it happens. Yeah. My favorite though was there was a student in the girls' class who was convinced aliens were going to show up at some point in my story, and they came home and told me this, and I was like, oh, they're going to be disappointed. I don't have extraterrestrial life, so sorry to bust
Oh,
that one.
they should write the fan fiction version of
Yeah,
that and
there
send it to
we
you.
go.
Send it to
Yeah. It was an interesting prediction, though.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I could see it could spin that way. You could have spun it that way. Why not? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's fun. I know I have some predictions for book 3, which I'm not going to share, but I'm very excited to find out more about Tazib.
Yeah, Tazib or Tazib. I kind of say it both.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always feel it like Tazib, but it's one of those things, right? You don't
Yeah.
know what an
Yeah.
author intends with a name pronunciation. But yes, he's a character that I I really deeply like, even
Hmm.
though there's so many things about him that aren't likable, but I really believe that there's good in him. And so I'm excited to see if I'm right or not. Um,
Yeah.
he's a fascinating character.
Yes. Yeah. I I agree. I find it fascinating too.
Uh,
And I think that's one of the fun parts as an author is that I can see him from Rye's point of view, and she just doesn't like him. Like she doesn't agree with how he does things or how he thinks. But then at the same time, I'm like, as the author, and I know what he's thinking, and I have those insights. I really like him too because, and I hope in book 2 this became a bit more apparent. But like in book 1, it's just kind of this vague,
yeah.
there's a terrorist sort of thing, like, and you have all these ideas of what and who that is or what they look like, and that's a big part of that story. And then book 2, Rye is sitting across the table from him, and like I just all those ideas you have in your head and being confronted with a different reality sort of thing, and how do you like put those together because he's a kid, like he's done these things, you can't deny he's done these things, but he's also a kid.
Your characters have so much maturity. So there's so often when I'm reading it, I have to remind myself, it, they're kids. Like, why are they so grown up? And I mean, we know why they're so grown up. They're forced into adulthood so early and you adapt. But him especially,
Mhm.
He feels like a 40-year-old.
Yes. Yeah.
But also like there's also like a quirky, or there's still a little childish thing about him, but yet like as if a 40-year-old was kind of quirky. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's such an it's just such an interesting dynamic, and
Yeah.
the characters are so mature, but they're so young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are times though when they, like, for the most part, they're doing a lot of very mature things and stay on track. And then every now and then there's these points where
Playing.
they don't. They just like they'll do something impulsive or they'll speak without thinking or like because yeah,
As
they're
a
not
kid
they're
too.
not adults yet. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah. And with Tats of book 3, it was a lot of fun to explore what his character looked like outside of the World Collective. Like I know for myself, you act different in different settings, right? And so I can't wait for people to read book 3. Like
Me
I'm just
too.
as excited for it as I am for book 2.
Is there anything else that you want to touch on?
I guess one thing is book 2 and the music side of
Mm.
it. I think that's always been one part of the story that I've always been a little nervous about portraying, but yet at the same time knew it was part of my story and necessary to be there. And so book 2, I really just tried to embrace it. I feel like in book 1, I was still being like really cautious and
Tiptoeing.
like, yeah, and just wanting to have it there, but maybe not just like embracing it. In book 2, I was like, nope, this is like this is it. And I feel like Rye herself is like embracing it, but also still struggling with it because it's another thing that makes her different from everybody else, and she kind of doesn't want to be.
Can you give like just a little background on what you mean by the music for anyone that hasn't read the book yet?
Yeah, so it starts off with in her dreams. Rye used to have nightmares all the time, crippling, like, and they're from her trauma as a child. And then she begins to hear music in her dreams, and it's like I'm always I'm always on the hunt for any sort of sounds that kind of remind me of what it sounds like in my head, which they've never been perfectly, but I've been starting to like collect different things because I want to. I think I'll be using that in social media a bit in the future to kind of share. This is what I hear. But basically, the music is it's not like anything we can imagine. It's like the sounds of the world coming together in perfect harmony. And when she listens to the music, she feels hope and peace and loved when she hears the music. And of course, it starts off just in her dreams, but as her journey goes on, it becomes much more real and much more powerful. And so in book 2, it's something that if she takes the time, she can hear it anytime now. Like when she's awake as well, she's starting to realize that it's not just like this thing that's in my dreams. It's like it's in the world around me. That there is that everything is kind of connected and in harmony thanks to the composer who creates the music and put each piece in its place, sort of thing. And so then it gives her this real stability for everything that's happening. Is this idea that I'm not a mistake, that I'm here for a reason, and things are going to work out. Even when it looks like nothing's going to work out, if she listens to the music in a piece of music, it moves. Like it's not just a one note, it's a long thing. And, there's the highs in the music and the lows, but it's going to all fit together
Mm.
in the end. And so, yeah, embracing that in the story and for Rye, like that's what in book 2 she's really finally learning to embrace that and what is it going to look like in her life. And even if everybody else around her thinks she's crazy, like like sort of thing, like kind of going, it still has so much power for herself, so she has to decide how do I see it and how am I going to view it, sort of thing. So I think that was something I had to embrace for myself in my writing because I think there's that fear of it might put some readers off. I think it's what was always kind of in my head. But at the same time, I was like, this is the story I have in my heart to tell, and I'm just gonna do it.
that, that is your
That's just
right.
me.
It is a thread that weaves through the whole thing, and
Hmm.
I'm assuming we are going to see a lot more of that in book 3 and get a little more insight into the composer. And
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and just how it shapes decisions and her relationships too. It plays
Mm.
into those things. Hmm.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing candidly about everything. I'm very excited for the next one. I'm excited for people to read United People. So
Me too.
keep doing what you're doing to get the word out, and I'll do what I can from my end. And I haven't met anyone who hasn't loved the World Collective. So
Mhm.
if you catch them on that one, they're along for the whole ride. So
Yeah,
it's just a matter of reminding people that here it is,
it's here.
get into it.
Yeah,
Congratulations on another great book.
thank you.
I'm
Yeah.
very proud of it. Proud to have it on my list.
I have to say, I spend a lot of time talking you up here in Shadow. Well, at the event at the library was other authors, and
Mhm.
so people are coming to talk to all the authors. But of course, then you're talking to each other, and you're all going, "So, how did you get published? And who are you published with?" And a lot of people were really curious when I was like, "Well, I published with a Canadian small press," and so yeah, I was sharing about you because
Oh, that's
that was
great.
exciting. I think for them to hear, a Canadian press was
Yeah,
definitely comfortable here. So you're doing a good thing.
but there should be more of them, but
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
pave the way.
yeah. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, this is fun.
Okay, yeah.
All right, we'll talk again soon. If not before, have a great Christmas.
Yes,
And
me too.
yeah, and when you're ready with book 3,
I'll send it your way.
yep, yep. I mean, no rush, no pressure, but yeah, I'm
It's
excited.
getting close, but yeah.
Good, good. Okay,
Okay.
great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Enjoy
Bye.
the rest of your day. Bye. Pop over to chickenhousepress.ca/bookstore to grab your copy of United People.